Black wife texted her mum, "He broke my arm, sent 2 wrong number." Korean Mafia boss replied, "Don't move, I'm coming." Part 2. The children called it the splatter room. Officially, it was Studio C at Eastern Sun Youth Center, but the name fit better, a sanctuary of creative chaos where rules existed only to protect, never to confine. Paint dotted the floors, walls, even parts of the ceiling. Every mark represented a moment of freedom, of expression, of healing. I moved among them, watching as tiny hands transformed blank canvases into riots of color and emotion. Some painted with careful precision, others with wild abandon. All of them were speaking through their art in ways words often failed them. "Miss Amara, look." 10-year-old Luca held up his canvas proudly. Unlike the bright, hopeful creations surrounding him, Luca's paintings always carried darkness, shadowy figures with badges, monsters wearing familiar faces. Today's piece showed a small boy hiding behind a wall while tall figures argued in silhouette. "It's powerful, Luca," I said, crouching beside him. "Tell me about it." His eyes, always too old for his face, met mine with solemn intensity. "It's about listening when you're not supposed to. Hearing things that make adults angry if they know you heard." I nodded, understanding the layers beneath his simple explanation. Luca had been with us for 3 months, referred after witnessing violence that no child should see. His uncle worked for a prominent business figure in Seoul, one whose operations occasionally intersected with Jae-sun's in ways that created tension. "Sometimes our ears catch things our hearts aren't ready for," I offered. "That's why we have art, to hold those difficult things until we figure out what to do with them." Luca considered this, adding another shadow to his painting. "Do you still paint the bad things you heard, Miss Amara?" The question caught me off guard, children's perception always sharper than we expect. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But they look different now. Less scary. Because you're not afraid anymore." His brush paused, waiting. "Because I understand them better," I corrected gently. "Fear doesn't always disappear, Luca. Sometimes we just learn to make it smaller so it doesn't control us." He nodded with the gravity of someone who understood concepts beyond his years. "Like taming a monster." Exactly like that. As the class continued around us, I reflected on how much had changed in the years since that desperate night in my bathroom when I texted the wrong number and found rescue in the most unexpected form. The Eastern Sun Youth Center had become my sanctuary, my purpose. My work with traumatized children had expanded beyond art therapy into comprehensive programs that were being replicated in centers across Seoul. And Jae-sun Kim, the stranger who'd broken down a door and changed the course of my life, had become something I'd stopped believing in, a partner who strengthened rather than diminished me. We'd found balance in our differences. My small but sunlit apartment represented my independence, a space that was entirely mine, paid for with my own salary. His minimalist penthouse had become our shared space, where we spent most evenings, cooking together, discussing our days, building a relationship founded on mutual respect rather than dependency. We were careful, deliberate in our togetherness. Learning the delicate dance of intimacy without surrender, of protection without control. Each day reinforcing what we'd discovered through crisis, that love could be disciplined, equal, and profoundly healing. As the session ended and children filed out with their creations, I checked my phone, a habit formed during those early months when danger still felt immediate. 3 new emails, 2 texts from colleagues, and a notification from the Justice Department's Victim Services portal. My breath caught as I opened it. Case #27845J, Marcus Johnson, status update, parole hearing scheduled. Potential early release due to overcrowding and good behavior. The phone suddenly felt heavy in my hand. Around me, the center continued its afternoon rhythm, children laughing in the hallway, staff preparing for the next session, but everything seemed distant, as though viewed through clouded glass. Marcus. Early release. The monster I'd escaped, potentially walking free again. My hand trembled once, then steadied as I set the phone down. A year ago, this notification would have sent me into spiraling panic, scrambling to disappear again. Now, I felt something different. A cold clarity, an assessment of threat rather than a surrender to fear. I was not the same woman who had huddled on that bathroom floor with a broken arm. I had resources now, both internal and external. I had purpose. I had Jason. Most importantly, I had myself, stronger, clearer, no longer defined by what had been done to me. Taking a deep breath, I began cleaning brushes with methodical precision, buying time to process before deciding whom to tell and when. Some habits remained. The careful calculation of information, the strategic planning that had once kept me alive. By the time I locked the studio that evening, I'd made my decision. I would tell Jason, but not immediately. First, I needed to contact my lawyer, understand the details, assess the actual probability of Marcus's release. Knowledge before action. Facts before fear. As I walked through the center's main hall toward the exit, I paused to admire the gallery installation we'd been preparing. Artwork from children who'd completed our program, testimonies to their resilience displayed alongside professional pieces donated by local artists. The exhibition was scheduled to open in 3 weeks, a fundraiser for our expansion. "Looking good," said Mrs. Cho, appearing beside me with her ever-present clipboard. "The lighting installation arrives tomorrow." And Mr. Kim called to confirm the additional security arrangements for opening night. I smiled at the formality with which she still referred to Jason, despite having met him numerous times over the past year. "Thank you. It's coming together beautifully. You've done remarkable work here, Amara," she said, her usually brisk tone softening. "These children, they're healing because of what you've built." The unexpected praise warmed me. "We've built," I corrected. "This is a team effort." She shook her head with a smile. "False modesty doesn't suit you. Own your accomplishments." Glancing at her watch, she added, "Now go home. You've been here since 7 this morning." Outside, Seoul was transitioning from workday to evening, streets filled with commuters, restaurants beginning to illuminate their signs, the familiar energy of a city constantly in motion. I walked the 6 blocks to my apartment building, enjoying the cooling air after a warm spring day. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Dinner at 8. I'm cooking." The simple message carried layers of meaning only I would recognize, his way of saying he missed me, that he wanted time together after 3 days of minimal contact due to his business commitments. Jason never demanded my time or attention, never made me feel guilty for focusing on my work. Instead, he offered, clear, straightforward invitations that I was equally free to accept or decline. "Yes. Bringing dessert." I typed back, smiling. Our shorthand for a night I planned to end in his bed rather than returning to my apartment. My building came into view, a converted commercial space with brick facade and large windows. I'd chosen it for its character, its proximity to the center, and its security features, habit rather than fear dictating that last requirement. As I approached the entrance, my phone buzzed again. Not a text this time, but an email notification. Opening it, I found no message, just an attachment. Curious, I downloaded it, then froze on the sidewalk. A photograph of me. Walking home. Yesterday. The angle suggested it had been taken from across the street, zoomed in to capture my profile clearly. Nothing threatening in the image itself, just me walking, lost in thought. But the implication was unmistakable. I was being watched. With suddenly heightened awareness, I scanned the street, searching for observers, cameras, anything unusual. Nothing stood out among the normal early evening activity, pedestrians hurrying home, a food delivery scooter zooming past, shops beginning to close. Inside my building, I checked the sender's address, anonymous rerouting service, impossible to trace. No subject line. No message explaining the purpose or intent. By the time I reached my apartment, 2 more emails had arrived. Each contained a single photograph. Me at the center, working with children. Me and Jason, walking hand in hand from his car to an upscale restaurant 2 nights ago. My mind raced through possibilities. Marcus couldn't be responsible, he was still incarcerated, regardless of the parole hearing. But he had connections, friends, possibly even people who owed him favors. The timing seemed too coincidental to be unrelated. I locked my door, drew the blinds, and sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the images. My first instinct was to call Jason immediately. He had resources, connections, security teams that could trace these messages, identify the photographer, eliminate the threat. But something held me back. The familiar voice of independence, of self-reliance that had carried me through my darkest times. I had promised myself after escaping Marcus that I would never again become completely dependent on another person for my safety or survival, even someone as trustworthy as Jason. Instead, I called Minho, Jason's right-hand man who had become something of a friend over the past year. Amara, he answered on the second ring. Is everything all right? I need a favor, I said, keeping my voice steady. Without involving Jason for now. A brief pause. I'm listening. I've received some concerning photographs. Someone's watching me. I need to know if you can trace the sender without alerting Jason until we have more information. Another pause, longer this time. Minho's loyalty to Jason was absolute, but he had also developed respect for my independence and judgment. Send them to me, he said finally. I'll see what we can discover. But Amara, if there's an active threat, he needs to know. Agreed. Just, let me be the one to tell him. Once we have facts, not just speculation. After sending the images to Minho, I showered and changed, deliberately focusing on normal routines to maintain equilibrium. By the time I arrived at Jason's penthouse, carrying a bag with a small cake from his favorite bakery, I had compartmentalized my concern, not denying it, but containing it until more information became available. Jason opened the door himself, something he rarely did at his own residence where security protocols usually meant staff-managed entrances. The simple gesture told me he'd been waiting, watching for my arrival. You're exactly on time, he said, drawing me inside with a gentle hand on my waist. As always. His kiss was warm, unhurried, a homecoming rather than a greeting. When he pulled back, his dark eyes studied my face with the careful attention that had initially drawn me to him, that still made me feel truly seen. Long day? He asked, taking the bakery bag as we moved toward the kitchen. Productive, I answered, following the scent of something delicious cooking. The exhibition preparation is on schedule. And Luca is making progress, his paintings still contain shadows, but he's beginning to add light too. Jason nodded, understanding the significance of this development in my young client. He had taken genuine interest in my work from the beginning, listening to my observations about the children's progress with the same serious attention he gave to business reports. You're transforming lives, he said simply, turning to check something simmering on the stove. It's remarkable to witness. The kitchen, like the rest of his penthouse, reflected Jason's precise aesthetic, high-end appliances, clean lines, everything arranged for both beauty and function. Yet over the past year, small signs of my presence had appeared. Colorful ceramic mugs among his monochrome dishes, a painting I'd created hanging on the previously bare wall, fresh flowers I'd brought last weekend still vibrant in their vase. We moved together with practiced ease, me setting the table while he finished preparing japchae, a dish he'd learned from his grandmother and perfected over years. The domestic harmony we'd established still surprised me sometimes. This dangerous, powerful man who commanded fear throughout Seoul's underworld standing barefoot in his kitchen, carefully arranging vegetables because he knew I loved color in my food. Minho mentioned the security arrangements for your exhibition are finalized, Jason said as we sat down to eat. The guest list has been screened. Additional personnel will be present but discreet. I nodded, grateful for his attention to these details without making me feel overshadowed. In the beginning, I'd bristled at security measures, seeing them as potential constraints on my independence. Over time, I'd come to recognize that protection didn't have to mean control, that Jae-sun's resources could enhance rather than limit my freedom. "Thank you," I said, twirling noodles around my chopsticks. "It means a lot to the children to have their work seen and valued. Some of them have never experienced that kind of positive attention." "Like you," he observed quietly. The simple insight, connecting my passion for the children's recognition to my own experiences of invisibility during my marriage to Marcus, demonstrated how deeply Jae-sun had come to understand me. "Yes," I acknowledged. "Though I had my grandfather. These children often have no one who truly sees them. They have you now." Something in his tone made me look up from my food. Jae-sun was watching me with an expression that still made my heart stutter. Admiration untainted by possessiveness, affection without expectation. "What?" I asked, feeling warmth rise in my cheeks under his steady gaze. "I'm simply appreciating the extraordinary woman across from me," he said, the hint of a smile softening his usually serious features. "Is that permitted?" "Always," I replied, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "As long as I'm permitted to appreciate the extraordinary man who cooks for me." His fingers interlaced with mine, warm and solid. A fair exchange. The evening unfolded with comfortable familiarity, dinner followed by quiet conversation on his terrace overlooking the city lights, sharing the day's events and observations. I found myself relaxing despite the earlier photographs, the notification about Marcus, the undercurrent of tension beneath my carefully maintained composure. Later, as we prepared for bed, Jae-sun disappeared into his home office to make a final business call. I changed into the silk nightgown I kept at his place, then checked my phone. 3 messages from Min-ho. Emails routed through multiple servers. Tracking in progress. Photos taken with high-end telephoto lens. Professional equipment. Security team alerted to increase surveillance discreetly. Will update when more information available. I deleted the messages immediately, another habit from my previous life that occasionally resurfaced. As I set the phone on the nightstand, I noticed Jae-sun standing in the doorway, watching me with unreadable eyes. "What aren't you telling me?" he asked quietly. My heart jumped. "What do you mean?" He moved into the room slowly, deliberately. "You've been different tonight. Controlled. Present but distant in moments. And you just deleted messages after reading them with an expression I recognize." "You were watching me." "I was seeing you," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." The distinction mattered, observation without surveillance, attention without invasion. Still, I hesitated, caught between my desire for independence and the relationship we've been building on honesty and trust. Jae-sun sat on the edge of the bed, close but not crowding. "Whatever it is, Amara, we face it together. Isn't that what we've learned this past year?" His words dissolved my resistance. Moving to sit beside him, I took a deep breath. 2 things. First, Marcus has a parole hearing scheduled. There's a possibility of early release. Jae-sun's expression remained calm, though I noticed the slight tightening of his jaw, the only visible sign of his reaction. "When?" "Next month. My lawyer says it's standard procedure given prison overcrowding, but with his record of good behavior, there's a real chance." He nodded, processing this information with characteristic thoroughness. "And the second thing?" I reached for my phone, retrieving the deleted messages from trash and showing him the photographs. "These started arriving today. Someone's watching me. Us." Jae-sun's calm facade cracked slightly as he examined the images. A dangerous stillness settled over him, the predator beneath the businessman momentarily visible. "You knew about this and didn't tell me immediately." Not a question but an observation, his voice carefully neutral. "I asked Min-ho to investigate first," I admitted. "I wanted facts before causing concern. Min-ho knew and didn't inform me." Now there was an edge to his voice, not anger directed at me, but surprise at his most trusted associate. "I asked him not to." "Don't blame him." I met Jae-sun's gaze directly. This is about me maintaining control over my own situation. Not shutting you out, just processing in my own way first. The silence that followed felt weighted, significant. A year ago, a similar situation might have created real tension between us, his protective instincts clashing with my need for autonomy. Now, I watched as he visibly worked through his initial reaction, respecting my approach even when it differed from his preference. "I understand," he said finally. "But Amara, there's a difference between independence and isolation. Between controlling your narrative and facing threats alone." "I know," I acknowledged. "That's why I'm telling you now, why I involved Minho. I'm not running or hiding, just approaching this on my terms." Jason reached for my hand, his touch gentle but grounding. "And I respect those terms. But these threats, the timing with Marcus's potential release isn't coincidental." "No," I agreed. "Someone connected to him is most likely responsible. Which means we need to be exceptionally careful." His thumb traced circles on my palm, a soothing gesture that contrasted with the seriousness of his words. "Not restricting your freedom, but enhancing your protection." The distinction mattered, the difference between a cage and a shield, between control and care. It was what separated Jason from Marcus most fundamentally, what made it possible for me to accept his support without feeling diminished. "Agreed," I said, leaning against his shoulder. "But proportional response, Jason. We don't know the actual threat level yet." He nodded, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Proportional. Discreet. And collaborative, no unilateral decisions on either side. Partners in this as in everything." "Partners," I repeated, the word carrying weight and comfort simultaneously. Later, wrapped in his arms in the darkness, I listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing and contemplated the journey that had brought us here. From desperate midnight rescue to this measured, mutual approach to potential danger. From strangers to lovers to something rare and precious, a partnership of equals despite our different worlds, different histories, different strengths. Whatever was coming, whoever was watching from the shadows, we would face it together. Not with me dependent on his protection or him controlling my movements, but with shared resources, shared strategy, shared commitment to preserving what we'd built. As sleep finally claimed me, my last conscious thought was of Luca's painting, shadows balanced by emerging light. The perfect metaphor for life after trauma, darkness never completely vanished, but gradually outweighed by brightness hard-won and fiercely protected. The next 2 weeks passed in heightened awareness. More photographs arrived, each more intrusive than the last, me inside my apartment cooking dinner, reflected in the center's windows during late-night work sessions, even asleep on Jason's terrace where I dozed during a sunny afternoon. Minho's team traced the emails to a series of public computers in different internet cafes across Seoul, professional work designed to obscure the sender's identity. The photographer remained unidentified despite increased security, suggesting someone with training and resources beyond the average stalker. Jason and I developed routines to address the surveillance without disrupting our lives, varying my schedule unpredictably, ensuring I was never truly alone in vulnerable locations, maintaining direct communication lines at all times. His security team expanded their perimeter around both my apartment and the center, always discreet, never intrusive. Through it all, I refused to shrink my life or activities. The exhibition preparation continued. My therapy sessions with the children deepened. Luca, especially, seemed to be making breakthroughs, his artwork gradually incorporating color among the shadows, small figures standing tall against looming threats. "The monsters are still there," he explained during one session, pointing to dark shapes at the edges of his painting. "But they can't come all the way inside anymore. There's a barrier." "What created the barrier?" I asked, noticing the translucent gold line he'd painted around the central figures. Luca considered this seriously. "Knowing the monsters are just people. Scary people, but still just people." His insight, so profound from a 10-year-old, resonated deeply with my own journey. Marcus had seemed monstrous, larger than life in his capacity to terrorize. Recognizing his humanity, his weakness, his insecurity beneath the violence, had been key to breaking his power over me. "That's very wise, Luca," I said. "Monsters seem biggest when we don't look directly at them." He nodded solemnly. "My uncle says knowledge is power." The mention of his uncle, a mid-level manager in an organization that occasionally competed with Jason's enterprises, caught my attention. "You've been talking with your uncle about monsters?" "Not exactly." Luca's brush stilled on his canvas. "But I heard him talking about power. About people who think they control the city." He glanced up at me, then away quickly. "About Mr. Kim." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. "What did he say about Mr. Kim?" Luca shifted uncomfortably. "That he's expanding into legitimate business too fast. That it makes some people nervous." He looked up at me with worried eyes. "Is Mr. Kim your boyfriend? I saw you together at the funding ceremony." The directness of children, their ability to cut through adult pretense to simple truth, never ceased to surprise me. "Yes," I answered honestly. "Mr. Kim is very important to me. My uncle says important people are dangerous to know." Luca's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said someone might get hurt to send a message." The child's words sent ice through my veins. Not because they revealed anything I didn't already suspect, but because they confirmed the surveillance might be about more than just Marcus. Might be connected to business rivalries, to Jason's gradual transition toward legitimate enterprises that threatened established power structures. "Luca," I said carefully, "sometimes adults say things when they're worried that sound scarier than they mean. But I appreciate you telling me. It's always good to share what makes you concerned." He nodded, returning to his painting. "I don't want you to get hurt, Miss Amara. You're the only grown-up who really listens." That evening, I shared Luca's comments with Jason as we prepared dinner in his kitchen. His reaction was measured but serious. "The timing aligns with information we've gathered," he confirmed, carefully slicing vegetables with the precision he brought to everything. "Kim Jin-woo's organization has been uncomfortable with my recent business acquisitions. The bank, particularly." I nodded, understanding the significance. Jason had recently acquired a controlling interest in a regional bank. A move that represented a significant shift toward legitimate finance and away from traditional underworld revenue streams. "You think the surveillance could be their work rather than connected to Marcus?" "Or both," Jason suggested, setting down his knife to look at me directly. "Marcus has a parole hearing approaching. He has every reason to resume monitoring you. But the professional quality of the surveillance suggests resources beyond what he could access from prison. An alliance," I concluded, the pieces fitting together. Marcus providing information about me, my routines, my significance to you. Jin-woo's people providing the professional surveillance. A logical cooperation, Jason agreed grimly. Marcus gets to torment you from behind bars. Jin-woo gets potential leverage against me as I challenge his financial territories. The calculation was chilling but made perfect sense. Marcus had always been strategic in his cruelty, understanding exactly how to maximize psychological impact with minimal effort. And business rivals seeking advantages would naturally exploit any perceived vulnerability, which, in Jason's case, increasingly appeared to be me. "So what's our approach?" I asked, returning to food preparation with deliberate calm. "We can't control Marcus's parole hearing outcome. And you can't abandon your business transition because of threats." Jason studied me with quiet appreciation, acknowledging my practical response rather than emotional reaction to the escalating situation. "We continue as planned," he said. "My security team will increase coverage, but discreetly. The exhibition opening proceeds. It's too important to your work in the center. But we add certain precautions." "What kind of precautions?" "I'd like you to stay here, at the penthouse, until we identify the specific threat actors." He raised a hand as I started to object. "Not as a restriction, Amara. Your movement remains unrestricted. Your work continues. But this location has security systems your apartment cannot match. I considered his request carefully, weighing independence against pragmatism. And my apartment? Maintained exactly as it is. Your home remains your home. This is temporary risk management, not an attempt to change our living arrangement. His careful distinction demonstrated how well he understood my priorities, my need for separate space, for independence alongside intimacy. This wasn't Marcus trying to isolate me under the guise of protection. This was Jason offering enhanced security while preserving my autonomy. All right, I agreed. Temporarily. And I want regular updates on the investigation, full transparency. Of course. He returned to his cooking, the matter settled with the straightforward efficiency that characterized our problem-solving. No drama, no power struggles, just collaborative decision-making between equals facing a shared challenge. As the exhibition opening approached, the photographs stopped arriving, a silence more unnerving than the previous surveillance. Minho's intelligence suggested increased activity among Jin Woo's organization, but nothing specific enough to act upon. Marcus's parole hearing was scheduled for the week after the exhibition, too close for comfort, but still offering a buffer of safety. The evening of the opening arrived with perfect spring weather, clear skies and mild temperatures that allowed the center to open its courtyard for overflow from the main gallery space. Children's artwork hung alongside professional pieces, each display illuminated to showcase the raw emotion and healing journey represented. I moved through the crowded space in a simple black dress that Jason had called elegantly formidable when I emerged from his dressing room earlier. Donors mingled with art world figures, city officials, and the older children whose work was being celebrated. Jason remained close but not hovering, present enough to signal his support, distant enough to let me shine independently. The exhibition is extraordinary, Mrs. Cho said, appearing beside me with a rare glass of champagne in her hand. We've already received commitments for funding 3 additional programs. That's wonderful news, I replied, genuinely delighted. The children deserve every opportunity we can provide them. Much credit goes to you. She nodded toward where Luca was earnestly explaining his painting to an enraptured couple who had the unmistakable aura of significant wealth. That boy wouldn't speak at all when he arrived. Now look at him. Pride warmed me as I watched Luca gesture animatedly, the couple nodding with serious attention to his explanation. The boy's journey from traumatized silence to confident expression mirrored my own in many ways, wounds transformed into wisdom, pain channeled into purpose. Miss Amara. Luca spotted me and waved enthusiastically. These people want to buy my painting. For real money. I excused myself from Mrs. Cho and moved toward him, smiling at his excitement. That's wonderful, Luca. What did you tell them about your work? That it's about seeing monsters clearly so they get smaller, he reported proudly. And they said that's exactly what good art does. The couple, whom I recognized as prominent collectors known for supporting emerging artists, nodded in agreement. He has remarkable insight for his age, the woman said. Such clear visual metaphor for trauma processing. Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught my attention. Security personnel moving with subtle urgency, communicating through earpieces. Minho appearing from nowhere to position himself between the disturbance and where Jason stood across the room. Years of hypervigilance snapped into focus. Something was wrong. Please excuse me, I said to the collectors, placing a reassuring hand on Luca's shoulder. Why don't you show them your earlier work in the progression display? It helps understand the journey. As they moved away, I scanned for Jason, finding him already advancing toward me with controlled purpose. His expression remained neutral, nothing to alarm the guests, but I recognized the tension in his shoulders, the alertness in his gaze. Security has identified multiple unauthorized individuals attempting to access different entry points, he said quietly when he reached me. Coordinated. Professional. My heart rate accelerated, but my mind remained clear. The children. We need to secure the children first. Jason nodded, already anticipating this priority. Minho is organizing their movement to the secure room in the administrative wing. Mrs. Cho is assisting without causing alarm. I glanced toward where Luca had been standing moments before, relieved to see Mrs. Cho already guiding him and several other children toward the hallway leading to the center's offices. The woman's efficiency was remarkable. Making the movement appear natural, part of the evening's planned activities rather than an emergency evacuation. How many threats? I asked, maintaining my public smile while surveying the space with new attention to exits, sight lines, potential dangers. At least 6 identified. Possibly more inside already. Jae-sun's hand rested lightly on my lower back, guiding me subtly toward the least exposed section of the gallery. My team is moving to intercept, but in a public space with civilians present. His hesitation spoke volumes. Jae-sun's security could handle almost any threat effectively, but not without potential collateral damage in a crowded charity event filled with children and prominent citizens. They were constrained by the very public, very legitimate nature of this gathering. Which was precisely why someone had chosen this moment to act. We need to evacuate guests without causing panic, I said, mind racing through options. Fire alarm? No, too chaotic. Something more controlled. Already in motion, Jae-sun confirmed. The center director is announcing a water main issue requiring building evacuation. Guests are being directed to the street where transportation is waiting. Even in crisis, his efficiency impressed me, anticipating needs, implementing solutions, maintaining control without visible effort. This was the side of Jae-sun that had built his empire, that commanded respect and fear in equal measure throughout Seoul. The controlled evacuation began smoothly, staff guiding guests toward exits, security personnel strategically positioned to intercept any threats without alerting the public. I remained beside Jae-sun, moving toward the administrative wing to check on the children. We were halfway across the main gallery when the first gunshot shattered the careful order. Glass exploded inward from a side window. Screams erupted as guests abandoned decorum for survival, rushing toward exits. Security personnel moved with practiced precision, some shielding civilians, others advancing toward the threat. Stay close, Jae-sun ordered, his body automatically positioning between me and the direction of danger. But my focus had shifted entirely to the children. Through the chaos, I spotted Luca, separated from Mrs. Cho in the panic, frozen in terror near the refreshment table, directly in the path of fleeing guests who might trample him in their rush to escape. Without hesitation, I broke away from Jae-sun, ducking low and moving fast across the gallery floor. His sharp call of my name barely registered as I navigated the chaotic space with single-minded purpose. More gunshots, more breaking glass. Security returning fire now, controlled and precise. But my world had narrowed to the small figure standing paralyzed amid growing danger. I reached Luca just as a surge of panicked guests threatened to overwhelm him. Sweeping him into my arms, I pivoted toward the nearest cover, a solid display wall showcasing children's sculpture work. "I've got you," I murmured against his hair as he clung to me, trembling violently. "You're safe. I've got you." The words, so simple, so essential, echoed what I'd longed to hear during my own darkest moments with Marcus. The promise of protection, of sanctuary, of someone who would risk themselves to keep you safe. From our position behind the display wall, I could see security engaging with multiple armed men who had breached the gallery's perimeter. Jae-sun was nowhere visible, either moved to safety by his team or actively involved in the defense response. The exhibition space had transformed from celebration to battlefield in moments. "We need to move," I told Luca, keeping my voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through my system. "Can you be very brave and follow me exactly?" He nodded against my shoulder, his small body still shaking but his trust absolute. "Stay low. Move only when I tell you. We're going to the blue door by the water fountain, okay?" Another nod. I set him down beside me, keeping one arm protectively around his shoulders as I assessed the safest path across the now emptying gallery. Most guests had evacuated, only security personnel, attackers, and a few trapped civilians remained. A familiar figure caught my eye, Min-ho, moving along the perimeter with lethal focus, systematically neutralizing threats. His efficiency was terrifying and reassuring simultaneously. Now, I whispered to Luca, guiding him into a crouched run toward the administrative wing entrance. We had covered half the distance when a new attacker appeared from behind a column, weapon raised. Time seemed to slow. I registered the man's face, unfamiliar but carrying the hardened look of someone accustomed to violence. Saw his weapon tracking toward us. Calculated that I couldn't outrun the bullet, couldn't reach cover in time. Without conscious thought, I pivoted, placing my body between Luca and the threat. Braced for impact. For pain. For darkness. Instead, I heard a single shot, precise, controlled, and watched the attacker crumple before he could fire. Beyond him stood Jae-sun, expression cold and focused, weapon still raised in a two-handed grip that spoke of professional training rarely displayed in his public life. Our eyes met across the chaotic space, a moment of perfect understanding passing between us. Not gratitude, not relief, but partnership. I had protected the child. He had protected us both. Each doing what we could from our position. Go, he called, already turning to address another threat emerging from the courtyard entrance. I didn't waste his coverage, propelling Luca forward to the blue door and threw it into the relative safety of the administrative wing. Staff had gathered the other children in the reinforced safe room designed for precisely such emergencies, another of Jae-sun's precautions that had once seemed excessive but now proved prescient. Amara. Mrs. Cho rushed forward as we entered the secure space. Thank God. We thought you were still in the gallery. I had to get Luca, I explained, gently transferring the still trembling boy to her care. What's our status? 17 children accounted for, all staff present. She gestured to the assembled group huddled in the windowless space equipped with emergency supplies, communication equipment, and reinforced doors. Police have been notified but response time is uncertain. I nodded, already moving toward the security monitor that showed feeds from cameras throughout the center. The gallery images revealed a scene approaching resolution. Jae-sun's security team had neutralized most threats, with Min-ho coordinating the final sweep for any remaining danger. Jae-sun himself stood in the center of the destroyed exhibition space, issuing directives with calm authority as police finally began to arrive. His composure was absolute. No trace of the deadly efficiency I'd witnessed moments earlier, just the respected community benefactor dealing with an unfortunate incident at his funded facility. Watching him manage this transition, from lethal protector to legitimate businessman in the blink of an eye, I fully appreciated the complexity of the man I'd chosen to build a life with. The duality that made him both dangerous and safe, depending on which side of his protection you stood. Is it over? Luca asked in a small voice from beside me, his eyes fixed on the monitor showing the gallery. I crouched to his level, meeting his gaze directly. The danger is over, yes. Now we take care of each other and help make sense of what happened. Like with art, he said, understanding immediately. We put the scary thing outside ourselves so we can look at it. Exactly like that. I agreed, marveling at his resilience even in the face of fresh trauma. And we remember that we survived. That we're stronger than the fear. It was nearly dawn by the time the center was secured, statements given to police, children reunited with frantic parents, and the full scope of the attack assessed. 3 of Jae-sun's security personnel injured but stable. 2 attackers dead, 3 in custody. No civilian casualties, a near miracle given the chaos and violence that had erupted. In the quiet aftermath, I found Jae-sun in what remained of the exhibition space, surveying the destruction with unreadable eyes. Bullet holes marred walls that had displayed children's journeys toward healing. Glass crunched underfoot where celebration had flowed hours earlier. The air smelled of cordite and fear. The children are all safe, I said as I approached him. Traumatized but physically unharmed. He turned at the sound of my voice, his expression softening from strategic assessment to personal concern. And you? I'm okay. I moved to stand beside him, both of us contemplating the ruined gallery. Better than okay, actually. I found something tonight I wasn't sure I still possessed. What's that? He asked, his shoulder just brushing mine, a subtle connection that grounded us both. The ability to move toward danger rather than away from it. To protect rather than just survive. I looked up at him with new understanding. What you do every day. Jason shook his head slightly. What I did tonight was necessary but not admirable. I took lives, Amara. To save others, I reminded him gently. To save Luca. To save me. Always, he said simply, the single word carrying the weight of absolute commitment. We stood in silence for several moments, processing not just the attack itself but what it revealed about us individually and together. How crisis had stripped away pretense, leaving only essential truth, that we were stronger together than apart, that our different strengths created a whole greater than its parts. Minho identified one of the attackers, Jason said finally. Former associate of Marcus Johnson. Recently released from a different facility. The connection confirmed our earlier suspicions, Marcus orchestrating from behind bars, using outside resources to implement what he couldn't do himself. And the others? I asked. Jean Wu's organization, as we suspected. Lower-level operatives, deniable assets. His expression hardened slightly. A message about my expansion into legitimate business. Using you, using the children, to deliver it. The calculated cruelty of the approach, attacking a charity event for traumatized children to make a business point, reflected a worldview so divorced from humanity that it defied comprehension. Yet it was the world Jason navigated daily, the darkness he worked within while gradually moving toward light. What happens now? I asked, practical as always even in the aftermath of violence. Jean Wu will deny involvement. Distance himself from the operatives in custody. Officially, this becomes an isolated incident, possibly connected to your ex-husband's vendetta but nothing more. Jason's tone was matter-of-fact, outlining the public narrative that would emerge. And unofficially? His eyes met mine, serious and direct. Unofficially, I deliver consequences that ensure this never happens again. That make it absolutely clear that you, the center, the children, all are permanently off-limits. The implication was clear. Jason would use methods outside legitimate channels to establish boundaries that the attack had violated. Would return to darker aspects of his power to protect what we were building in the light. A year ago, this might have troubled me more. The recognition that the man I loved still operated in shadows when necessary, still carried capacity for calculated violence alongside his genuine kindness. But tonight had clarified something important. That protection sometimes required force, that safety sometimes came through strength rather than gentleness. Do what you need to do, I said quietly. But don't lose yourself in it. Don't surrender what you're building for the sake of retribution. He studied me with surprised appreciation. You continue to amaze me, Amara. Most would demand I choose, all legitimate or all shadow. You understand the necessity of both. Because I've learned to contain contradictions, I explained. To recognize that human beings are complex, that light and darkness often coexist in the same heart. I touched his face gently. Your capacity for violence doesn't diminish your capacity for love. It's part of the whole man I've chosen. His hand covered mine, eyes reflecting both gratitude and determination. We'll rebuild this, he promised, gesturing to the destroyed exhibition space. Make it stronger. More secure without feeling like a fortress. Yes, I agreed. Because these children deserve beauty and safety simultaneously. As do we all. The following days brought intense activity. Police investigations proceeded along expected lines, focusing on Marcus's connection rather than any larger organizational conflict. The center implemented enhanced security while maintaining its welcoming atmosphere for children. Donors, moved by the attack on such a worthy cause, increased their support to fund not just rebuilding but expansion. 3 days after the exhibition attack, as we worked with contractors to redesign the gallery space with both aesthetics and security in mind, my phone rang with a call from my lawyer. "Amara," she said, her voice carrying professional concern. "I wanted you to hear this from me directly. There's been a development regarding Marcus Johnson's parole hearing." My hand tightened on the phone. "What kind of development?" "The hearing has been cancelled. Indefinitely." She paused. "Marcus was found dead in his cell yesterday morning. Apparent suicide, though the investigation is ongoing." The world seemed to still around me. Marcus. Dead. The threat that had shaped so much of my life for so many years, suddenly, permanently eliminated. "I managed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Thank you for letting me know." After ending the call, I stood motionless in the center's temporary office, trying to process emotions too complex for immediate understanding. Not grief, I had mourned the man I thought I'd married years ago. Not joy, death brought no satisfaction, even of someone who had caused such pain. Perhaps relief, but muted, complicated by questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. When I finally looked up, Jason stood in the doorway watching me with careful eyes. His expression revealed nothing, yet somehow I knew immediately that this news wasn't surprising to him. "Marcus is dead," I said simply. "Apparent suicide in his cell." Jason nodded once, neither confirming nor denying any prior knowledge. "How do you feel about that?" The question was genuine, not defensive or leading, but open to whatever complex response I might have. It was one of the things I valued most about him, his willingness to accept my authentic reactions rather than expecting prescribed responses. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Relief, I think. But also, emptiness. As if a chapter closed before I was quite finished reading it." He moved into the room, stopping at a respectful distance, present but giving me space to process. Sometimes closure doesn't arrive in the form we expect. "Did you?" I began, then hesitated, unsure if I wanted the answer to the question forming in my mind. "Would it matter if I did?" he asked quietly. I considered this carefully, examining my own ethical boundaries against the reality of the world we inhabited. Yes and no. I believe in justice, in legal consequences. But I also recognize that systems fail, that some threats can't be contained by conventional means. Jason's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, Marcus Johnson made many enemies during his incarceration. His connection to the attack here, which endangered children, became known within the prison population. Draw your own conclusions. The careful phrasing offered plausible deniability while acknowledging reality. Jason's network extended into every corner of Seoul's systems, including corrections. Information could be shared without direct action taken. Consequences could arrive through channels that maintained clean hands for those who initiated them. "I understand," I said finally. "And I can live with that understanding." Something settled between us, a recognition that our moral worlds would never perfectly align, yet we could find ethical common ground in the complex terrain between ideal justice and practical safety. That I could accept the darker aspects of his methods while he respected my preference for legitimate solutions whenever possible. "What happens now?" he asked, echoing my question from the night of the attack but inverting it, seeking my direction rather than offering his own. I moved to the window overlooking the center's courtyard, where children were engaged in an outdoor art project, creating a collaborative mural under Mrs. Cho's guidance. Despite recent trauma, they were resilient, creative, healing through expression and community. Just as I had healed. "Now we build something meaningful from all this," I said, watching Luca carefully add his contribution to the collective artwork. "Something that transforms pain into purpose." Over the following months, transformation became our focus. The center reopened its exhibition space, redesigned with subtle security enhancements that preserved beauty while ensuring safety. My therapy programs expanded to 3 additional locations across Seoul, reaching more children affected by trauma and violence. Most significantly, I established the Wrong Number Initiative, a foundation providing comprehensive support for survivors of domestic violence. The name acknowledged my own journey while creating a resource I had desperately needed during my darkest moments. Immediate response, practical assistance, and ongoing support for women seeking to rebuild their lives after abuse. Jason, meanwhile, accelerated his transition toward legitimate business, gradually divesting from shadowed enterprises while expanding his banking, real estate, and technology holdings. The attack had clarified his own priorities, strengthening his determination to build legacy rather than just power. We maintained our separate residences. My apartment representing independence I would never again surrender, his penthouse offering shared space where we continued building our relationship. The arrangement raised eyebrows among traditional Korean families, but Halmoni surprised everyone by defending our choice. Different gardens require different soils, she told disapproving relatives at a family gathering. Their love grows stronger because they don't force it into conventional shapes. 6 months after the exhibition attack, on a clear autumn evening at Halmoni's traditional house outside the city, Jae-sun and I exchanged vows in a ceremony that blended Korean traditions with elements of my Louisiana heritage. My crimson hanbok, embroidered with delicate gold threads, complemented the traditional attire Jae-sun wore with natural dignity. Halmoni presided with ancient words and modern wisdom, blessing a union that defied conventional categories. You have found in each other what few discover in a lifetime, she told us during the private tea ceremony that followed the main celebration. Not completion, but amplification. Not possession, but partnership. Honor this rare gift by continuing to grow both together and apart. Our honeymoon was brief but meaningful, a week at a remote coastal property Jae-sun owned, where we discussed plans for our shared future while respecting our individual paths. Upon return to Seoul, we resumed our work with renewed purpose, building bridges between our separate worlds that strengthened both. The Wrong Number initiative grew rapidly, gaining support from legitimate businesses that had once been reluctant to associate with anything connected to the Kim family name. As Jae-sun's public reputation shifted from feared power broker to respected philanthropist, doors opened that benefited not just his enterprises but our shared causes. 1 year after the exhibition attack, I sat in my office at the Foundation's headquarters, a converted warehouse space designed with both beauty and security in mind. The afternoon sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating the artwork from center children that decorated my walls, including Luca's progression series showing darkness gradually balanced by increasing light. A notification chimed on my computer. A message from our emergency response system that monitored texts to our public hotline. Most were routed directly to trained staff, but certain keywords triggered alerts to supervisors. Opening the system, I saw the exchange that had triggered the notification. Unknown, help me please. My husband broke my arm. He's coming back. I'm hiding in bathroom. Response team, we're here to help. Are you in a safe location right now? Unknown, no I sent this to wrong number please forget it. Response team, this is the Wrong Number initiative. You reached exactly who you needed to. We can help. What's your location? No response had followed, the woman likely afraid to trust, to believe help was actually available. I recognized the pattern intimately, the moment of desperate courage followed by fear, by conditioned distrust of offered assistance. Without hesitation, I opened the direct response interface, typing personally. I know you're scared. I've been where you are. Hiding, hurt, believing no one can help. A year ago, I texted what I thought was the wrong number when my husband broke my arm. That mistake saved my life. Let us help you. You are not alone. Seconds stretched into minutes with no response. I was about to activate our emergency protocols, which could trace the message location and dispatch both medical assistance and security, when the reply appeared. Please. I'm at 327, Maple Street, apartment 4B. He'll be back soon. I'm so scared. Stay hidden. We're coming. You're going to be okay. As I mobilized our response team, medical professionals, security personnel, trauma counselors, I felt the perfect symmetry of the moment. 1 year ago, I had been the woman hiding in a bathroom, reaching out to a wrong number in desperate hope of salvation. Now I was the one responding, turning my healing into hope for others. When Jason called later that evening, I shared the successful intervention. The woman safely extracted, receiving medical care, her husband in custody, her future now containing possibilities beyond fear. "You've created something remarkable," he said, pride evident in his voice. "Something that will outlast both of us." "We created it," I corrected gently. "Your resources, my experience. Your security knowledge, my therapeutic approach. Neither of us could have built this alone." The truth of this statement extended beyond the foundation to everything we created together, a relationship that honored independence while celebrating connection, business enterprises that balanced profit with purpose, a life that incorporated both our separate strengths and our shared vision. "Partners," he acknowledged, the word carrying all the history of our journey from that first desperate text message to our present reality. "In all things," I agreed, looking out my office window at the Seoul skyline as twilight transformed the city into a carpet of lights. "Equal, honest, and stronger together than apart." As I gathered my things to leave, heading home to the apartment I still maintained as my personal space before joining Jason later at the penthouse we increasingly shared, I passed the Foundation's main response center. The team was handling another incoming crisis call, their voices calm and focused as they coordinated assistance for someone whose name they didn't yet know, whose face they hadn't seen, but whose need they recognized and honored. On the wall above their workstations hung a simple frame containing a cracked iPhone, my phone from that night a year ago, preserved as a reminder of how wrong numbers sometimes connect us to exactly the right people. Beneath it, a single line of text captured the essence of everything we'd built. "Sometimes the path to healing begins with a mistake. If you believe no one's listening, look again." Someone once thought her message went to the wrong number, and it saved her life. Subscribe now so the next cry for help doesn't echo into silence. If you can't, say in the comments why indifference feels safer than involvement.